Hello and welcome to Broadsword Wargaming. My name is Ollie and in this video I'm going to show you how I built a snowy, space wolfy, orky diorama thing. It is actually my small contribution towards a great charity cause. This model will be going away as a raffle prize to help raise funds for the charity C.A.L.M, Campaign Against Living Miserably. Essentially a campaign looking at men's mental health, and what better way to do this other than to show our support with miniatures. The 40 Hours of 40k group have managed to get 20 artists to paint, promote and sculpt this amazing Necron army that you can see here. This 3,000 point army is the main prize and the highlight of the whole event. Do check the links down below because not only can you bid for this army and own a great army as well as putting some money towards charity, you can donate directly. All funds received for the bids as well as donations do go straight to the charity, so make sure to check all of that out. On to my part of the project. Well, I've had Ragnar knocking around in a box now for quite a while. I don't know what to do with him, so I thought this seems like the perfect opportunity for me to mess around with some snow. So I bought a 4x6 inch picture frame with a little bit of a lip there like you can see, and got to drawing where I think things might go. I have never done a diorama like this before and certainly never tried anything as ambitious as this. I've never worked with snow, I've never worked with frozen water effects, but I'm hoping this can be a good learning experience for all of us. To start laying out the ground forms, I'm using some 10mm foam. I was going to use polystyrene like I normally do for all of my bigger board builds, but I just felt they might be a little bit too cumbersome, a bit clumsy, and I probably couldn't quite control it to the way I'd like to. I just cut this into shape around the picture frame, then sliced down until I ended up with some shapes I was happy with. At this point, I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted. I know I wanted Ragnar standing over the orc, potentially on a giant rock or cliff face with some frozen water between the two of them. To secure the foam to the picture frame, I'm going to be using the Geek Gaming Scenics Fast Dry Basing Glue. You could of course use PVA, but I find this is a little more tacky, so it holds a little faster, and that allows me to keep on working on the project instead of waiting for ages for it to dry. As you can see, I doubled down on some sections, cut into them a little bit more, made a few ridges, made a few mistakes, pulled some foam off, but ultimately I've got a shape now that I'm quite happy with. To secure everything and make sure everything is nice and firm and I can sculpt it, I'm going to be using the modelling compound, again by Geek Gaming Scenics. This is a dry powder which you add some water to, and then just slap it all over the base and everywhere you want it to go. It dries quite quickly, so do make sure to work fast and work in small areas if you need to. I'm going to put a couple of rock molds in. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with these yet, but I find they're a nice way to cover the sides of bases. Slate is a material I've not really worked with much. I figured this could be the time to do it because slate can give you that nice dark glossy finish which would give me that frozen watery ice effect. I'm going to stick tons of slate in, and I happen to find a huge piece of slate outside in the garden. My neighbour's garden is in where their plants live, but I only nicked one, and then I'm going to sculpt this into the cliff face, and now we have a Simba Pride Rock Lion King-esque rock for Ragnar to stand from. We'll call this Ragnar's Rock. It's the circle of life. Just make sure when you've used the modelling compound, you get some water and you smooth it all down and keep it off of the rocks. This is the texture you want. Next is the base ready city rubble, all available down below in the links on my own shop, broadswordwargaming.com, #shill. You can just layer this around underneath the parts where you want the rocks to go, because rocks fall, and I always think this looks a lot more natural than just smooth, bland transitions. Using the matte scenic sealant, I'm going to use this and spray this all over the rocks just to hold everything in place. Then it's on to airbrushing. Airbrushing is my favourite part of the hobby, and if you didn't know, do check out the link there to the video of how to airbrush. This is really designed for beginners, but I'm sure if you're experienced, you can learn something too. Using the surface primer from Vallejo, I'm going to spray the models black, so Ragnar and the Orc are back. I'm not going to go into a full in-depth how to paint these models, but I will show you the steps I take to get them ready. The two of them there are now base black using the Vallejo black. Then we'll start putting some colour on. I've had a colour scheme in mind for Space Wolves for quite a while. Little do many people know, but Space Wolves were the first Space Marine Legion I collected. So it's nice to go back and do something I used to do. Using the dark Space Wolf colour here, this could be the Fang from Games Workshop. Just get this over a nice undercoat, but do try and leave some darker areas, particularly in the recesses or in between the legs. Then it's onto Wolf Grey, or the Fang if you're using Games Workshop colours, and aim this at those higher points. We're looking at a a diorama piece here. We want some atmosphere. This isn't an heavy metal paint job. Admittedly, I couldn't do that anyway, but if you can manage to achieve something that gives off a bit of tension, a bit of feeling to the piece, I think we can really combine this into the board. Just to add a bit of colour, I'm going to put Juchi Violet into the recesses, into the dark areas, the particular areas that are almost black. And when the model moves in a particular light, you should be able to see some slight purple shimmer, giving the model a bit more fuller colour finish. Because the model is mainly about Ragnar, I don't want to put the orc into some sort of overly bright colours. We're also doing snow. The white stands out quite a lot against darker colours. So I'm going to make the orc a relatively dark grey-black and leave him there. Of course I will put the details on, but he isn't going to be stealing the show. He's not the main star. That's Ragnar. A quick black glaze will tie all these colours together, and then we can move on to the board. Whilst we have the airbrush out, I might as well get stuck into some slate. Now I undercoated this with a cheap black primer from the pound shop, and then hit it with various purples and greys to really try and add some colour there. I am aiming to keep the whole thing quite dark because, as I said, once you put snow on, the darker the ground, the stronger it looks. If I ended up with too many wishy-washy colours here or started putting greens in, things like that, I'd have to make sure I'm positioning things correctly because otherwise it doesn't quite show up how you'd like to. If you imagine when you're looking out into the distance on a snowy day, next time you do that, take a look because trees look darker, bushes look darker, houses look darker because your eyes are accustomed to the bright white. That one actually is a little tip from Luke over at Geek Gaming, so thank you, Luke, for that one. Having put the browns on and left the river quite dark, I wasn't sure whether to put a blue river in or not. It kind of didn't feel like it fitted with the piece, so I left it quite dark. On to the Green Stuff World UV resin. This is something I've not used before. I know Kira from the channel has tackled this occasionally on a little bit of base work, but I wanted to give this a proper go. There are lots of different ways to use resin. Do make sure you're using a mask because it does smell a little bit. But this one is meant to be pretty easy to use. As far as I could tell, you just pour it in and then use a UV light on it. It kind of self-levels, it's a bit thicker than you might expect, not quite like water, but you can slosh it around until you end up getting it where you want it to go. And this also is why we have the lip on the board, because once I've pushed everything down, I can then fill this up to the side of the picture frame, and I don't really have to worry about damming the edges off. Stick a UV light on it for a couple of minutes. It does get quite hot at this point, so do make sure you're not putting your hands on it. Another little trick is I got some crumpled up sort of plastic paper. This would have been better with baking paper or something like that, but something with a bit of texture in it. Put a little bit of the UV resin on it and set it like you would have done previously. Stick the UV light on it and you'll end up getting some sort of little ice shard, icicles or frozen ice depending on how big you've gone. I peeled these off and cracked them and there we have the top of the river. This is frozen, not completely frozen. Then put a small layer of UV resin on top of the section that you just cured and stick these into it. And boom, you have a cracked frozen lake top. Now here comes the star of the show, the base ready snow powder. I sprayed the board with some varnish and then sprinkled this on using a sieve. Initially, I was scared. I was worried. There was too much on there. I tried loads of different ways to get it off. I brushed it off, blew it off, and actually thought I'd ruin the whole thing. But no, here comes the old polyurethane varnish. Spray this on after you've applied it and keep sprinkling it on. I found that didn't work as well, so I ended up pushing it into the recesses and into the joins and into the areas where I wanted. Then sprayed again with the varnish and kept repeating the process until I ended up with something I was happy with. Using a combination of brushwork and using my fingers and the spray cans, you end up with a really nice finish. Gloss varnish I used here, you could use matte force, but the gloss varnish gave me a really wet effect on the stone and I was super happy with the finish we got. And there we have it, that is the base part of the diorama. Yes, we still need to do the models, and I know you're saying, but Oliver, it didn't look like that a minute ago, what did you add in? Well, I used some Clearfix here to make some crystals. Now, this was kind of a fiddly process and it wasn't that easy to record. Plus, I'd never done it before myself, but ultimately I got the back of a spoon, loaded up with some Clearfix, blodged it on and pulled it down until it set into those crystally shapes. The models. I painted these at home, I gave them as much attention as I could because I wanted them to be good. I want them to be special because this is all for a really good cause. I am also painting it within a group of people who are exceptional, and I myself am not. I'm standard, I'm average, but I gave it some heart, I gave it some soul, and hopefully that shows. I started using rusty effects on the orc. I tried to keep him dark. As you can see, the wash really toned down the armor, and it's quite a clean paint job at the end, so I'm pretty happy with these and happy enough to stick them onto the boards. I was going to use a Dremel and drill these on, but actually as it turns out, the super glue stuck fine and I could stick snow to it to cover it up. Gloss varnish onto the models. We're wet here, we want some snowy effects, and just like I did with the actual board, I used and threw snow effects, I threw snow at the models as well and pushed it into the recesses. Then to touch it up, I used some blood for the blood god because the orc has a big bloody axe and dragged it along. And this is what we ended up with. A full diorama. Am I happy? Yes. Are there things I do differently? Yes. Have I learned something? Yes. Have you learned something? I hope so. Do remember to check out all of the links below. Go and take a look at the 40 hours of 40k stuff. Take a look at the charity stuff as well, because I think it's all for an excellent cause. And if you want the Necron army, get your bids in now. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed yourselves, and I'll catch you in another video. Take care.